Well, hey, it's Dr. Phil. You're on Fill in the Blanks, and today we're talking about fraud. And I'm doing this because there is so much going on right now. Maybe it's because we're opening back up and people are getting more active, but there's so much happening right now that I'm getting so much interest from people about scams and frauds and cons. And you've seen it on Netflix with the making of Anna, and I interviewed Anna Delvey last week. So that'll be on Dr. Phil soon. You'll hear what's going on with all of that. But I want to talk today about who are these scammers? Who are these con men? And I'm not talking just about the catfish that we deal with here. Why do they do what they do? What do they do? All of those sorts of things. And understand there are different kinds of currency that motivate con men and fraudsters. Different kind of payoff. Some people obviously do it for the money. Some do it for attention, do it for fame. Maybe they do it for sympathy. But there are different kinds of currency. We're talking about the confidence man, the con man, the scams that they run. And they're internet scams, there are mail scams, there are phone scams. But I promise you, before the end of this month, some scammer, some con man is going to intersect with you in your life one way or another. And so I want to talk about how to spot these things, what the red flags are, so you don't become part of this multi-billion-dollar industry. I want to talk to you about how you can stay safe online, how you can ensure you aren't the next victim. I have some great expert lawyers with me today, Tracy Siska, Laura McNeil, Steve Greenberg, and Xavier Pope, who I will introduce more thoroughly in just a minute. But let me set the stage first. Because when we talk about con men, I mean, who are we talking about? Are we talking about just straight up criminals, psychopaths, sociopaths that are just evil people that were just born to exploit other people? Or are we talking about good people that do bad things? Or are we just talking about bad people that just were born to just exploit others and be evil? And the fact of the matter is, it's both. There are good people that wind up exploiting others, cheating others, conning others, and defrauding others. And let me tell you how they get caught up in that. There's been a lot of research about this, actually. There have been a lot of case studies. There have been surveys and group studies about how people that have spent their whole lives getting educated, working regular jobs, being contributing members of society, that wind up being con men, scam artists. How do they get there? How do they come to that point in their lives? And I'm going to tell you how they get there. They get there a little step at a time. They're not sociopaths. They're not psychopaths. They weren't born without a moral compass. What they do is they start out fudging something a little bit. Maybe they're getting a bank loan and they think, well, you know what? We're not going to quite qualify for this. So they just inflate things a little bit. Like maybe they say, okay, we've got to have some assets here. We're going to have to pledge our cars or a second home we have or something, and it's going to have to be worth a certain amount, and it's not quite there. Maybe it was one time, but it's not now, but let's put an old value on it where it was worth more then than it is now. And so they just write down that number that's maybe $25,000 more or 50 more, and their banker's a friend. He trusts them, so they don't go into it a whole lot. And it flies. They get the loan, and it's okay. So they go, wow, you know, it was just a stroke of a pen. It worked out okay. And then so something else comes up pretty soon. And they say, how much equity you have in your house? And you say, well, you know, I could add a little bit to that. Or, you know, how much debt do you have? Well, I could mark that down some. And then before they know it, they've got a whole web of deceit out there, and they've borrowed more than they can afford. They owe more than they can ever service. And so now they have to keep the ball rolling or it's going to hit a wall. So they go to a friend and say, "Hey, could you attest to this for me? Can you say you paid this? That you bought this for me? Can you say you're buying this house from me? Can you do this?" And the person that does it doesn't think they're committing some big crime. They just think they're helping out a friend. Like, "Yeah, sure, I'll help you out." And then they get roped into it. And then pretty soon, this person now is defrauding a federal lending institution. And if anything ever comes crashing down, they're going to be in a whole lot of hurt. And then the government comes along and starts saying, "You know what? You might qualify for this relief. We've had a pandemic here. We've had a downturn. If you do. And people think, well, if I could just move a little bit, I just might get in there. I did my master's thesis way back in 1976, and the title was Androgyny and Moral Judgment. And what we were looking at was whether or not men and women judged certain scenarios differently just based on whether they were men or women or not. I'll give you an example. Did it matter whether you would steal something from a garage sale versus a big corporation? A yard sale, garage sale, somebody on the corner. Was that a bigger infraction than something from a large corporation or the IRS, a big entity? Did men and women see that differently? Was their moral compass more sensitive based on sex? We would put people in different situations like, okay, I'm living in subsidized housing and my child wants to go to college. Well, I can't help them go to college unless I take a part-time job. But if I take a part-time job, I no longer qualify for subsidized housing. So I'm in a catch-22. If I take the job, that's enough money to help the child go to college, but then I lose the housing subsidy, so now I can't help them go to college. So the only way that I can help them is if I take the job, but I don't report it. Well, is that an infraction? And if they decide to do that, do men or women judge that differently? There's all kinds of factors that go into whether people consider something crossing the line. So it's not just crooks, bad people that choose to cross the line. And here's the big difference that research has shown us as to whether people will justify something or not. If you approach them and say, as you look at this, look at it either, is it best for the business or is this ethical? If they approach it in terms of what's best for the business, they're much more likely to cross the line than if you put a frame around it. Ask yourself if this is ethical. Because what might be best for the business might not necessarily be ethical, and it matters how they enter into the decision making. If you sensitize them to ethics in the very beginning, they're much less likely to cross the line than if you sensitize them to what's best for the business. So it all has to do with the mindset they use when they go into it. I've seen two basic categories. One is people that ease into it. Like they start out and they say, okay, I'm going to fudge these financials a little bit. I'm like, they want to know what this asset's worth. I'm going to give myself benefit of the doubt here. I'm going to fluff this up a little bit. It works and nobody says anything. They say, what's this building worth? And you might think it's worth $200,000 and they say $225,000. And so they take that 25 extra and they go, hey, that worked out okay. And so nothing happened. Nobody was hurt. Everything went okay. The lie just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And before you know it, they go to their friends and say, hey, will you help me out here? Will you say that you are buying this house? Or will you do this or you do that? And the friend doesn't think they're destabilizing the economy. They think they're helping Steve. So they say, yeah, okay, I'm your friend. I'll do it. They don't realize that they've just committed fraud when they signed this document to a federal lending institution. They just think they're helping their friend. You've gotten sucked into it. So they start out small, and before you know it, they've got 40 or 50 loans. It's Bernie Madoff. So you ask them, didn't you realize that at some point this was going to hit the wall? And the answer I've found is no. They never actually projected forward and thought the day's going to come when this is going to all come due and hit the wall. They keep thinking there's going to be one more iteration, one more thing that's going to get me past this. So that's one side that thinks that they just ease into it and then it just gets bigger and bigger. The longer you chew it, the bigger it gets. Then the other category is the narcissist that thinks the law just doesn't apply to them, that they're Anna Delvey, they're the type that thinks I'm so important, I'm so talented, I'm so big that I fly above the rules. I fly above everything. I can do what I want. It doesn't matter. Nobody's ever going to hit me. I'm good to go.
Listening to you, it made me think of the guy at WeWork. Right? That it kept growing and he kept lying about it and he didn't have to worry. And at some point, he even got Wall Street to approve the IPO. I mean, that's how big it got. And then it wasn't days away from that IPO that it all started collapsing because people finally started looking behind the scam, and all of a sudden people realized there was nothing there.
I think it's common to see the first example where people keep thinking the next time I'll stop after the next time, almost like a form of an addiction, and they think they're invincible. And it keeps getting bigger and bigger. They look up, and then what I typically hear them say is, "I was in too deep at this point. Too many people were involved for me to turn it around or to stop." And so I still think that because the internet creates such a platform for these types of things to grow expeditiously, very quickly, we as a community have to do more community policing on the internet, meaning, as they say, see something, say something. A lot of times I see scams, and I don't necessarily report every scam that I see. And that's someone with the legal training that I have. And I think that we have to be reconditioned to, as we do with bullying, if you see something, say something.
Well, we've seen in several instances, major documentaries that are getting a lot of attention, the most viewed, it seems to capture the attention and just better than scripted television. And so we are rewarding people who are scamming and saying, hey, you'll get your own documentary too. You'll get your own Netflix special about you too. You get a chance to sell whatever you need to sell and profit your wares. And then the next person gets a chance to go to Snapchat and to the Instagram and to Twitter and whatever and scam other people as well.
We call them con men. And we forget that that's short for confidence.
Confidence game.
Because the person comes on with huge confidence. I'm from Texas, and so, back in the 80s, I always had people trying to sell me oil deals. And they'd come in and they'd have a Rolex on. They'd be driving a Lincoln or a Cadillac. I mean, they dressed for success. Everything was there. The Rolex wasn't real. The Cadillac was 3 payments behind. And they're trying to sell me an oil deal. And my first question was always, how much money you got? Walk me into your bank. Let me talk to your banker. That's when the show Dallas was on. Yeah. They talk like they got all the money because all the confidence in the world, people don't ask questions. We give people the benefit of the doubt without asking questions.
Because we want to believe that people are honest and we want to believe that people we're dealing with, we can trust them. But at some point, some of these scams are just, you just shake your head at how people could do it. I'm representing someone now, and the alleged scam that he was running, and there's a number of these. Everyone's doing the same thing. Everyone hasn't gotten caught yet. Retired military who use Navy Federal Credit, sends out emails saying, this is Navy Federal Credit. You need to give us your information. We've determined that you need this loan, blah, blah. And people would get these loans, but the loans would get paid, the checks would get paid to the scammers. Now, why is someone taking out a loan and having the check paid to someone else? You have to wonder what is going on in someone's mind where they're getting a solicitation and signing for a loan to go to someone else that they don't know with the promise that they're going to pay the money back.
But you made a good point when you said that, people, we want to believe in people's honesty, but the way we process information, we all make assumptions. When we walk in this room, we made assumptions. When I first saw Xavier, I made assumptions based on his appearance. And so these scammers are very keen on that. The products they serve, they make it look like Dr. Phil quality when they're putting forth these products. And so I don't know if it's so much as, I think the scam is the art of it as well, meaning it's preying on how we process information, how we make assumptions, how we make decisions based on appearance.
It's a confidence game.
Yes.
Right, but as a criminal defense lawyer, I always think that the biggest scam is that someone raises their hand, swears to tell the truth, and they're actually going to tell the truth. And people think, well, they swore to tell the truth because they're the same people who we think are lying about what originally happened. So if they get up there and they tell the same story, they're still lying. And really, why does that change? If you're an inherently bad person, or dishonest person. You have
the legal training to know that. My 7-year-old mother's not going to know that. She's going to believe
your 78-year-old mom's not going to know that.
But as a society, we think that just that act of walking in a courtroom and raising your hand, on a Bible, some non-religious person raising their hand on a Bible, somehow going to make them truthful.
There's plenty
and it's
of,
not. So we like to believe.
There's plenty of juries that don't believe.
But we like.
That's why you say you have a criminal defendant. That's why you tell them don't take the stand, because the jury might not believe you. So it's all about the confidence game that con men are able to win. So they're able to connect with what relates to you. They have a profile of who they're speaking with. They have their information about them. They know a lot about them, and they're able to do that.
Right.
I had a client recently call me and walk me through a company saying that she had taken out almost 10 credit cards. And in her brain, she's like, oh, what did I do? And she's thinking, and they're preying on this person, thinking that something is wrong, this urgency. And that's also attached to the con. Give me your number now. Give it now. Mm-hmm.
What are the signs? I mean, we need to tell people, because you guys know, you see this all the time from a legal point of view. What are the signs? Because I always tell people, one, for example, places like the government, the IRS, they don't call you.
They don't.
They do not call you. My mother was called, and she called me and said, the IRS called. No, they didn't. No. I didn't even let her finish the sentence. So the IRS called and said, I owe $2,300. No, they didn't. The IRS does not call you. That's the first thing, right? If they call and say, hey, listen, they're getting ready to garnish your bank accounts. They're getting ready to seize all your... No, that's not true. They don't call, right? That's a big warning sign. Government agencies don't call and demand money over the phone and right now and tell you to go send a money order. That should be a big red flag. That should be like a Navy flagman on the end of the deck, right? Waving at you. That's a big red flag. True?
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't threaten to arrest you either. And another client talked to me about her being threatened to be arrested. I said, if they were going to arrest you, they'd be at your door. They're not threatening you.
There's a DEA scam that's going on it's been going on for at least a decade now, where people get a call from, hey, we're with the DEA and you've been buying illegal drugs. And some of the people, the law of averages, right? Some people say, I haven't been buying any drugs at all. But some people are either buying illegal drugs or they're buying drugs, legitimately, but now they're scared. And, you have to send this much money as a civil penalty or we're going to arrest you. That's been going on for years.
Right. I think the best advice I would give is, number one, if it looks too good to be true, it's probably true. Trust your instincts. People ignore their instincts and say, I knew something was off. Trust your instincts. And I think it's also important to make sure if they're asking you to transfer any account numbers, if someone's cold calling you and asking you for your account number or to transfer funds anywhere, those are huge red flags. And again, my mother's been scammed a million times, a bank calling, allegedly her bank saying they need to lock her account down. It's been compromised. We need your account number. And so I think those are three major red flags, as you would say, to look out for.
And I think also these same scammers, ask them for their information. Ask ways to verify them. And when you start asking questions about verifying them, and then they'll start to back off. They don't want to get their information. They don't want a legitimate email attached to a company that you can actually research and look at.
That's the sign. That's where you hear the click.
Click.
Right. Ask
Or
a
if they have
question.
a foreign accent, a real thick foreign accent, and they say they're from the IRS.
Yeah,
That's
IRS,
probably
the
it.
IRS knocks. That's what they do. They don't call.
That's the language they use.
Right.
Yeah.
Knock on the door.
And scammers pressure you to act immediately. You got to act on this right now.
I'm on someone's list for car insurance and it's like insurance, even though we got done with the payments. So a car that got totaled in an accident many years ago now and is gone. But like every 6 months, we're contacted by email and mail. They're just hard after us on this scam related to our old car that's 3 or 4 years, 4 years gone from us. But it's hardcore, and they just this is 5 years now. They just keep coming after us for this. And
Yeah, that time is important. Act now. You are put in a position, particularly if you are of a vulnerable population like senior citizens, that give up personal information right now. The intense pressure on them, and you don't see a lot of senior citizens committing crimes, and so in their brain, they want to be able to protect themselves from if they unfortunately did something that they accidentally maybe was illegal. And so that timing element, pushing you to do something in that moment, is one of the biggest elements of why scams work.
That's a big, big flag. And what worries me is mail fraud. I've seen, and I've got examples of them, letters that they don't look like IRS letterhead. They've actually taken the IRS letterhead and put it on a letter and sent it. It's the IRS letterhead. They've hijacked it and put it on a letter. So you look at it and go on the website. Well, hell, that's the IRS letterhead. If it's an organization but the promise, the demand, or the problem doesn't sound right, then you've got to get personal contact, right? You've got to call somebody and say, hey, I got a letter here. Is this a department? Is this a request that you guys would make or whatever? And you get stuck in voice jail, but you got to figure something out.
Right.
I mean, this is a multi-billion-dollar problem.
You also have to think about the extensions that some of the websites may be used. It looks like the IRS, it's IRS dot another extension, not gov. It's this look-alike website that may be able phishing your information as well.
What about these debt collection scams with these people calling to say, you owe money and you pay us this, we're going to forgive that? Because they have somehow gotten a hold of somebody's numbers, they've hacked in, they've bought something, and they know what people owe. How do people protect themselves from that? What do you recommend people do when they get somebody calling saying, you owe $2,000, pay us $500, we'll wipe your debt out?
The Federal Trade Commission allows for individuals to get one free copy of their credit report. So you want to be able to get that, and then you want to call those credit agencies and get a full copy of your credit report, walk yourself through it, see what's on there, and find verify the accuracy and call the companies that are there to verify the debt. I mean, that's important because there are rules that protect consumers in that
Right.
case.
If someone calls and says, hey, we'll forgive your $5,000 for $1,000 after you get past the initial shock of it sounds too good to be true, as she said, then I think you want to call the actual company that you owe the debt to. Just all people have to do to prevent getting scammed when they get a call is say, give me your number, let me call you back. I'll call you back in 5 minutes.
Do your homework.
And
Yeah,
that's
I
it.
support,
Do your
I
homework.
support
That's
what you
it.
said, because a lot
Yeah.
of times before it hits your credit report, there's like a 30-day or 60-day window. And so it may not show up and it might be legit. And so I think it's important to go straight to the source. That's always going to be my advice to any client. You go straight to the source. If it's a certain department store, call that department store and they'll say, this is the credit bureau or the credit collection company that we use, and you call them directly.
One of the ones I've seen recently that was shocking to me, but we had a couple on the show, is the parent/grandparent scam. You talk about lazy scammers, but they get the number. How they get it, I don't know. But they get the number and they call up and say, Grandma, do you know who this is? Like it's playing the game. And they say, well, is this Karen or Carol? Yes, it's Carol. Okay, now they know she's got a granddaughter named Carol. Then she says, I'm in so much trouble. I've got to have $500 or I'm going to go to jail. Please don't tell Mom. Can you send me $500 by Western Union? Please don't tell my parents, they'll kill me. Honest to God, this is going like wildfire. And the couple that we had on, someone called them, got the daughter's name and said, we have your daughter. And she couldn't reach the husband. And they were demanding $10,000 right now, or they're going to kill the daughter. And she couldn't reach the husband. He was on a flight. Fortunately, she contacted a friend who said, no, wait a minute. They actually got the daughter out of class at school and verified that she was A-okay. But they wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't paying off. If it's 1 out of 100 times, then you've got $10,000, and they're running these on phone banks.
If you're making $500 a day doing it, you get one person to take $500 a day, 5-day work week.
Yeah.
You're making 6 figures now.
Once again, they are playing on urgency. They are playing on people's fears, things that are close and personal to them, and maximizing that to be able to gain confidence in that moment that it's legitimate, and then transferring that into to the scams that they're doing on people.
I think we're saying it real clear. You've got to talk to the source. You can't give in to the pressure, because time pressure is what's getting people to pull the trigger, right?
Exactly. That's the time pressure. It's you must do this now. It doesn't matter what the act is. Pay this money. Get this person free. Do this, do that. And it's right now. Act immediately, because they know that if that call is done, well, they'll move on to the next call. But they will try to maximize the urgency of that moment as much as possible.
And also they're maximizing it because, Xavier, they want to make sure that you don't call your daughter or your son.
Exactly.
Right? Or your neighbor or your friend who's to verify the legitimacy of it. So that's also part of the scam before they, in terms of their credibility being compromised. Or
right.
Found out,
You look at anything, they're always preying on the urgency. You go to buy a car and the dealership knows
example.
Once you walk out, you're probably not going to buy the car. Or you go to buy a timeshare. Go to a timeshare sales thing and they put all the pressure on you. And then, because they know you aren't going to call up later and say, I want the timeshare. So this is no different. You got to strike when the iron's hot.
It's a different form of sales. I mean, any type of sales training, people have one and they have multiple rebuttals until it gets to the end when they're gone. Scams are working the same way.
Well, one of the things that I am stunned by are these romance scams out of Nigeria. We do the catfish shows about these people, and I thought I had seen it all until recently. I had a woman on that was convinced that this was the love of her life. 2 years, never met him, never done a FaceTime with him, hadn't done a phone call with him. It was all text, and she had sent him about $300,000. I had her on the show. He had stolen these pictures from somebody. She only had 6 pictures. And he was sending her all these love letters and stuff like that. I found the guy whose pictures were stolen, had him on satellite so she could see the real person, said, I'm so sorry, that's not me. I had my picture stolen. Said, you see the guy? All these documents he had sent, he was stuck in Africa and construction site, had been robbed on the way to the airport, excuse after excuse after excuse. She said, oh my God, I feel so stupid. She left the show. The guy started talking to her again. She sold her house and sent him the money.
Wow.
After the show?
After I introduced him on satellite that it wasn't him. And she sold her house and sent him the money to come meet her. He didn't show. She came back on the show still believing he was real. I brought the real guy in from North Carolina. She only had 6 pictures. We brought the 6 shirts he was in the pictures in, showed her him and the 6 shirts, and let her meet him in person. And she now swears she totally believes it this time. But here's this woman that worked 30 years, gave him all of her money, sold her house, gave him all the money, has nowhere to live, totally broke.
But that doesn't sound like that. Sounds like it started out as a scam, and there might be some issues that she has. If you had her on and she knew it wasn't, it wasn't real.
The key is romance.
Yeah,
The key is romance, because the center of romance, people want this fairy tale life, and the person that's on the romance scam, they're utilizing these fancy and taking advantage of that. The person is conjuring in their mind all these different scenarios, and so even when they're presented with the fact that it isn't true, what they're doing is going along. This is part of the romance, the adventure, the intrigue. Oh, wow, now it's Dr. Phil is involved. They even brought another guy with pictures. This is all playing into the element of excitement that's with romance.
And also, they always promise, when I come, I'm coming with millions.
That's right. But I've got millions, but I need your money to get the millions.
I need your money to get the millions.
Listen, I'm stuck here. I just have to pay the tax. I have to pay the levy. I have to do this or that. And then I'm going to come with $10 million. I'm 30 years younger than you. And I'm just crazy in love with you. I'm going to take care of you the rest of my life.